My mom will be happy now. Well, it's good to be back, and I'm glad that we finally are having Bible studies again. It feels like forever since this, and I've really missed it. Um, it's like it keeps me studying, and anyway, glad to be here this morning. Um, I was thinking earlier this morning as I was getting around. I thought about when Elijah ran to the wilderness, afraid for his life, and he was hiding in a cave, and an angel came and spoke to him and said, go up to the mountain. And he went up to the mountain, and y'all know the story. There was first there was the wind, and a wind so strong that it shattered rocks. I mean, it's an amazing wind. And then there was the earthquake, and then there was the fire. And the Bible said that the Lord wasn't in all of that. But then he heard a still, small voice. And that was the Lord talking. And in thinking about that, I want to, especially the beginning of a new year, lots of changes going on. I want to be able to hear the Lord's voice. Because if I hear others and think that it's God and follow, that's a dangerous place to be. We need to know the shepherd's voice. We need to be in tune to the voice of God and know where God is leading us. It's so important to know the shepherd's voice. And I hope you haven't come here today for an in-depth, expository, deep study of the Word, because all I have this morning is a simple thought about knowing the voice of our God, knowing the shepherd's voice. And if you turn to John chapter 10, we all know this story of the Good Shepherd, but I wanted to look at it in detail this morning. Starting at verse number 1. It says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber." And I did a little research on sheep in preparing for this lesson this morning, and I don't know how familiar you are with a sheepfold, but it was just basically a fenced or a gated enclosure where the shepherd would settle the sheep for the night, just to have them a safe place to rest. And the sheep would be in there, and many times the shepherds would join together, and there would be multiple folds of sheep in one sheepfold, where the shepherds could kind of work together and get a little sleep, take turns watching the flocks. But the sheep would be in that enclosure where the wolves and the bears and the sheep couldn't scatter during the night. The wild animals would be kept out, and it would give the shepherds a little break. But if you think about what it would be like in a sheepfold, it was an enclosed area, and lots of sheep in there, and it would be a very dirty, nasty, stinky place to be. And even the sheep probably wouldn't enjoy it too much, because that many sheep in one small area, there would not be a blade of grass around. So it wasn't a very pleasant place, but it did temporarily give them shelter for a time. And this first verse tells us that if there's someone that climbs over the wall instead of going in by the gate, you know that's going to be a thief and a robber. It's not going to be, because there's a certain order to things, a certain way. There's one way to enter. And, spiritually we can apply that. There is an order to things, a way things need to be done. And if someone's trying to do something, go about it an absolutely, obviously wrong way, that's something you need to look out for. Verse 2 says, "But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter," or the door watchman, "openeth. And the sheep hear his voice." So the sheep, they hear the shepherd's voice, but notice this next phrase, "And he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out." He calls them by name. There's that personal relationship there between the sheep and their shepherd. They know who their master is. They know his voice, and they are known by the shepherd. The shepherd calls them by name. They're not just some nameless face in the crowd. They're not just one of many, but they are intimately known by the shepherd. And that's the kind of relationship that God wants with his people, with us individually. He knows me by name, and he knows you by name. And you need to be in tune to his voice. Now, an interesting fact that I learned was when these shepherds would have their flocks intermingled together, the amazing thing is when the shepherd calls for his flock, then his sheep are the ones that will come. A lot of times you think sheep are dumb. They're dumb creatures. They just go with the crowd. They go with the flow. You lead them here and you lead them there, and they're just dumb animals. But really, they're not. As a matter of fact, they did it. Scientists did this study in the last 2 or 3 years, and they determined that the memories of sheep, their brains, work very similar to the way the human brain works. And they determined that sheep can remember voices and faces about as good as humans can. Sheep can remember like 50 faces 2 years from now. Their ability to remember is way beyond what you would think of thinking about sheep, because we always make fun of those poor dumb sheep. But there's a reason that God calls us sheep many times. When the flocks are together and a particular shepherd calls for his flock will come, and those other sheep know, oh, that's not my master, that's not my shepherd, and they stay. And only that shepherd's who called, only his sheep come because they recognize him. They're not dumb creatures. They know their shepherd. So he calleth his own sheep by name and leadeth them out. Verse 4 says, and when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him. So after he calls them out from that stinky enclosed area, and they head out to where the green pastures are, those sheep follow the shepherd. And there's a reason they follow the shepherd, because they have their trust in Him. They know He is not going to lead me into harm's way. He's not going to lead me wrong. I can put my trust and my faith in my shepherd. And so those sheep know. And one of the most amazing things to me in Scripture is that there are principles found in the Bible that you can bank on. There are principles that are set forth, and they might as well be written on tablets of stone, because when God puts forth that principle, it's an anchor. It's something that you can just depend on. When God says, reap and you will sow, I mean, that's a principle set forth in Scripture that you can bank on. When God says, give and you will receive, pressed down, shaken together, running over, that's a principle in the Word. And in Malachi, Jesus even said, you can try me. Just try me. Try to outgive to me and see what happens. Those are principles. And one of the principles set forth is, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Another principle is, I have never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging bread. God knows how to take care of His people. And He has established things in His Word that no matter what situation we find ourselves in, no matter what goes on around us, we can take hold of those foundations that God set forth in His Word. And we can just take them to heart because they are truth. Because He is truth. So in verse 4, when He putteth forth His own sheep, He goes before them, and the sheep follow Him. And here's why. For they know His voice. Now, how do you think those sheep knew the voice of their shepherd? Well, they have to listen to Him. And there's something else I learned about sheep, is when a little lamb is born into a flock, that little lamb doesn't automatically know what to do. But that mama sheep and those other sheep set forth examples for that little lamb. And that little lamb, when that shepherd's call comes out and he sees his mama reacting to the voice of that shepherd, then that little lamb learns, oh, that's my shepherd's voice. And that lamb learns to follow. And when he sees all those other sheep in the flock perk up when they hear the master's voice, he learns by example. And you know, we as a church, when babies are born in our flock, they will learn how to follow the shepherd's voice by the way we as the flock follow the shepherd's voice. They learn by example from the flock. You see, it's no accident that God compares His church to a flock of sheep, and our pastor as the shepherd, and Christ Himself, God Himself, as the good shepherd, because we as the church, we as the flock, have to set an example for new babies that listen to the voice of our shepherd. You need to learn to listen. And when you hear that voice, trust and obey. because our shepherd's not going to lead us wrong. And we follow the voice of the shepherd. That little baby, it learns by example from its mom. It learns the voice of its shepherd. Verse number 5 says, "And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers." So that flock will help to teach that little lamb, don't listen to other voices. Don't be pulled in other directions. You only follow the voice of the shepherd. Now verse 6 says, "This parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. Then said Jesus unto them again." He wanted them to get this point. It was so important for them to get this. "Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture." In other words, there's only one way. There's only one way. You can't find other shortcuts. There's only one way, and Jesus is the way. And we need to learn to hear and obey his voice. Verse 9 says, or actually verse 10, "The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep." In other words, he's saying, I'm a good shepherd. I'm not going to lead wrong. And I'm going to give my life. They didn't understand it at that time, but he was foreshadowing his own death here. But he says, I give my life for the sheep, but it goes even beyond that. It goes to the point that I'm willing to do whatever it takes because I love you so much that I want you to be saved. And that's how God feels about each and every one of us. He gives his life for the sheep. Verse 12 says, "But he that is an hireling and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth, and the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep." So what's he saying here? He says, someone who's hired, they're not gonna, when it comes right down to it, they're not gonna give their best to get the job done. Because it's not their babies. It's not their flock. They're just in it for the money. And you can draw some parallels here with the church. If we don't take ownership of the flock, it's my flock. These new babies that come in and pray through, if we don't take ownership, they're my babies. They're my sheep. They're part of the flock now. That everything in our power must be done to protect our flock. Many times the sheep need to, and this is something that you find in real sheep flocks. A lot of times you think, they're just sheep out there, dumb little sheep just roaming around, and it's up to the shepherd and the little sheepdog to keep them all herded. But that's not really what goes on, because that mama sheep, those same studies that determine that their brains remember so much, did you know that a mama sheep knows her baby's cry and can pick out her little lamb's cry over the other little lamb's cries? When her little lamb might wander slightly away from the flock and give a little scared cry, that mama sheep is the first one whose ears perk up. Oh, something's wrong with my baby. And that mom will come to that baby's rescue because that mom knows her baby's cry. And so those sheep aren't just dumb animals, but they work to take care of each other. And they know each other's voices and they know each other's faces. And, a baa sounds just like every other baa to me, but there's a difference, and those sheep can recognize the differences. But a hireling is not going to stick around and work for the well-being of the flock. He's not. When the flock's in danger, he's going to run, protect himself. Verse 13 says, the hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling and careth not for the sheep. Look at verse 14. I am the good shepherd and know my sheep and am known of mine. And I don't know what that does for you, but to know that my God knows me. And notice the two-way street here. He says, I'm the good shepherd and I know my sheep, but I'm also known of my sheep. In other words, that flock has a responsibility to know their shepherd. They need to learn the voice of the shepherd, and they need to make an effort to know. Because if they don't know their shepherd's voice and follow their shepherd, then their safety is compromised and they're at risk of being lost. He says, I'm the good shepherd, I know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Verse 16 says, and other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Now this, of course, most Bible scholars believe that he's speaking of the Gentiles here, where the Gentiles, there's some not of this flock, not of the Jewish flock, but those are his, and they will know his voice too. And I'm so thankful that God chose to graft us into his flock as well. It says, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. And then skip on down to verse number 27. It says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. So notice, the sheep hear the voice of the shepherd, and they know their leader. They know their shepherd, and they follow their shepherd. Now, that word voice there in verse 27, and actually throughout all these scriptures, comes from the Greek word phone, which means sound or spoken word. In English, it was interpreted into voice. But the word phone comes from another Greek word called pheno, which means to enlighten or to shine. And if you put those two thoughts together, a spoken word that enlightens. In other words, a message. And if you reread chapter 10, verse 27, in that context, looking at the meaning of the Greek word behind it, you could think of it as saying, my sheep hear my message. Not just the words, but they are enlightened by the meaning behind it. My sheep hear my message, and I know them, and they follow me. And it's our responsibility to not just hear the sound of the voice of God, but to be able to recognize when we hear a message, that's a message from God. That's a word from God. Because if you hear the voice, if you hear the message and it doesn't mesh, you feel that catch in your spirit, that doesn't sound like my shepherd. That doesn't sound like that voice that I'm used to hearing. Then more likely than not, it's not. Because if your relationship with the Creator is such that you know Him, when you hear a message, you will learn to recognize that was from God. That was a word from God. And the closer you are, the better your relationship is with the Master, the more in tune to His message, His word, what He relates to you, the more you will recognize truth from confusion. A lot of times you hear people talk and they say, I'm so confused about this, or I've lost my burden, or I don't know what direction I should be going in. Part of the problem might be that they've lost the tune, the timbre, so to speak, of the voice. Because there's another verse that I learned last year that says, for where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Because confusion is not from God. And if voices that speak to you are causing confusion, chances are it's not the shepherd's voice that you're hearing. Because His voice will lead you beside still waters and will send joy and refreshing to your soul. And even when you walk through that valley of the shadow, you won't have that tension and that fear and confusion, because He is the good shepherd. And to be in tune with His voice is a place that I long to be, that I desire to be, because He doesn't want us to be in a state or a place of confusion. He wants us to know His voice and to hear His message and to be able to parse out all the other sounds and hear His voice and His word. And the closer we are, the more we have that relationship with the shepherd, the more we learn to recognize His voice and His message. I know I've already covered a lot of this, Interesting facts I found about sheep. They stick together. Sheep like to stay in flocks, and there is safety in the flock. There is safety in the flock. It's not a good thing to wander off and think, oh, there's greener grass here. No, trust the shepherd, because there's safety in where the shepherd leads. There's safety in the flock. Sheep stick together, and they know each other, and they love each other. They take care of each other. They teach new sheep to follow the shepherd. And there are many times when a shepherd will go and will barter and bring in even an adult sheep from another flock into his fold. And it won't be long before that sheep that has come from another flock is assimilated right in, because the other sheep will teach it. This is the way the shepherd does this. This is the way our shepherd, this is his voice. Look at how we follow our shepherd. So even it's not just true about new babies that are born, but it's also true about sheep that the shepherd buys and brings into the flock. The other sheep will help it to assimilate. And they teach the new sheep, whether they're newborn or old and grafted in or brought in, they teach them to follow the voice of their shepherd. And not only can sheep recognize up to 50 other sheep faces and remember them for 2 years, and this was a 2-year study, so I imagine it goes even beyond that, but they can also recognize human faces. This next fact, I thought, has many spiritual analogies. Sheep have excellent hearing, but poor vision. They have excellent hearing, but poor vision. Sometimes they don't see things clear. And because of that, they must put their trust in that shepherd. But their hearing is excellent, but they have poor vision. And they might think they can see good, but there are many times that they just have to trust, because what they think they see might not be what they really see. They self-medicate, and I thought this was very interesting. Those dumb animals that we have been taught are dumb, when they get a little tummy ache, they know what plants to go eat to settle their little tummy. That's just amazing that they know to do that. But they know which plants to eat for different ailments. And that just is a reminder to me of how great our God is. That even a dumb sheep is smart enough, knows more than a veterinarian sometimes, because it knows what plants it needs to get better. And sheep trust their shepherd. They know that when that shepherd calls, I need to follow, because he's going to take me somewhere where I can find something to eat. And he's going to take me somewhere where I can sleep and not get eaten by a wolf. That sheep knows to trust his shepherd. And then sheep and shepherds are mentioned 247 times in the Bible, which I thought was kind of neat. Let's turn to 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4. It says, Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. It's the same thing that Jesus said in John chapter 10. He said, I am the door. If you try to come any other way except through me, then that's the thief and the robber. Verse 3, And every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. This is the spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it should come. And even now already is it in the world. Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. They are of the world, therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of God. He that knoweth God heareth us. He that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby know we the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and every one that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. We need to learn. We need to do like these scriptures say, try the spirits. And if you are in tune with God and hear His voice and love Him, then He will protect you from voices that try to pull you away from Him. We need to learn to hear God and to love Him and love each other. Because love is of God, and we know Him through His love. And I wanted to end in Isaiah chapter 31. Isaiah chapter 31, starting at verse number 1. It says, Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses, and trust in chariots, because they are many, and in horsemen, because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord. Yet He also is wise, and will bring evil, and will not call back His words, but will arise against the house of the evildoers, and against the help of them that work iniquity. Now the Egyptians are men, and not God, and their horses flesh, and not spirit. When the Lord shall stretch out His hand, both he that helpeth shall fall, and he that is hoping shall fall down, and they all shall fail together. For thus hath the Lord spoken unto me, like as the lion and the young lion roaring on his prey, when a multitude of shepherds is called forth against him. He will not be afraid of their voice, nor abase himself for the noise of them. So shall the Lord of hosts come down to fight for Mount Zion and for the hill thereof. As birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending also, He will deliver it, and passing over, He will preserve it. And then verse 6, where I was getting to. Turn ye unto Him, from whom the children of Israel have deeply revolted. In other words, your help isn't going to come in numbers. And it's not going to come in putting your trust in the things of this world. But your help will come in hearing the voice of God and in listening to the voice of God, in learning His voice, staying in tune with Him. That is where we need to learn to turn. We need to learn to turn and follow the voice of the Good Shepherd, to follow the voice of our Shepherd, to hear His voice, to know His voice, and to learn of Him, and to learn to put our trust not in anything else, but our whole trust has to be in God, that He is not going to lead us anywhere except where it is His will for us to be. And usually that's what we find in Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. No matter what happens, I know I can put my trust in God and learn to hear His voice. And you can't go wrong if you follow the shepherd. Praise the Lord.